Hello there, it's Ken Utley again. We're going to introduce you to the data entry part of the SIMSII during this video, how to accomplish it, how do some of the shortcuts work, and how to get yourself better organized to deal with the database entry simply by knowing what it all means. We can easily access the account maintenance menu and then E for edit, update, and account. I've chosen the account Tequila Willie's on the demonstration disk as our starting reference point. I'd like to start out our conversations here by identifying the account number and the breakdown of the account number. The account number is made up of 12 characters, of which the first two characters are the receiver number. That's up to a 2-digit receiver number, followed by a dash, followed by a 2-digit group number, followed by a dash, followed by up to 6 digits of the digital or the actual subscriber number. Now the receiver number, the first two characters, have to do with the receiver that's coming in on. And the second, the grouping character, is the way we group our lines together. For example, if this were an Ademco receiver for conversation speak, and it was an 8-line receiver, and all those lines were grouped together on a rotary, we would identify all those lines as possibly group 01. So that if an account came in on line 1 or line 7, it all comes up to the SIMS as the same account number, which is group 01 on the receiver, and then the account number. By doing this, of course, you limit yourself to the number of characters that are made up of the, in some cases, the digital number, which is, in most cases, a 4-digit account number. So that if we handle all of our groups as one, we could only get 10,000 accounts on any one receiver. However, some of these receivers allow groupings of multiple. Some have them up to 32 lines. So we can make lines 1 through 8 one group, lines 9 through 12 another group, lines 13 and 14 another group, and so on and so forth like that. Okay, the next field within the account is the group field. It's a 4-character field that identifies groups of accounts. For example, we might have 10,000 accounts coming in receiver 1, grouping 1, but some of those will belong to one third party. Another group of those accounts might belong to a chain store grouping that might belong to the central station, and so forth. Well, by using this 4-character group site identifier, we can use this particular field to identify the dealers as well as the chain stores, or however we want to break down the configuration. This is very important later on when trying to provide instructions for groups, trying to email out accounts for one group to a certain place, etc., etc. So later on, this is going to be a very important part. I think this is a fairly familiar term in our industry right now, group or dealer IDs. So there should be a clear understanding of that. There is also another group called the class. Now, even though an account or a group might be made up of third-party accounts for a group Acme, within that grouping there are also commercial, residential, UL grades, some supervised, some not supervised, and that's where the class field can come into hand. Now notice many times within the SIMSII database you'll have an F2 key that'll bring up a pop-up screen that will identify many different programmable types, in this case class selections. We have ATMs. This particular account I believe was a C+S, which is commercial Berg plus fire with supervised openings and closings. You can set this whole grouping up any way you want to. The demo has a very nice breakdown that you probably would find very helpful in grouping your own accounts. But this is the account class selection. Now, the next field, of course, is the name of the account. The name of the account is a 38-character field that identifies the name. Could be a commercial name, in this case Tequila Willie's. It could be the name of a residential account, Mr. and Mrs. Patrick Gray or whatever. If it's a commercial account, the next field might have a contact name with an identifier on there. There is another field for the address. We may want cross street. This is fairly important when we're trying to help the police or the dispatching group identify where they're going and how's the easiest way to get through there. There is a 25-character city field and up to a 3-character state field. Follow that with a zip code up to 10 digits, a fax number, a phone number for the primary, and an alternate phone number, which might be the first line versus the second line coming in. There are control phone numbers. In this case, this is the number that it's coming into at the central station. This is the second possible number. Obviously, we need 2 phone numbers in both of these cases because we have a primary dial-in, possibly an alternate dial-in, and so forth like that. Now, while I'm in this field area, I also want to bring your attention to the fact that this phone number is the phone number that the panel is connected to out in the field. Now, if I'm using caller ID, this is where we're going to put in the phone numbers that let us know where the panel is calling from. No need to put that in manually. The SIMSII database, when connected to a receiver that provides caller ID, will automatically load that phone number into the first or second field depending on how it goes. Later on down the line, if we get a mismatch, a signal comes in from a number other than what's programmed into the account, we will identify to the operator's attention that it's a caller ID error. So we're going to get caller IDs OKs in case of matches, caller ID errors when the phone numbers don't match. If you're dealing with a 9 for an outside line, you may have to go to the nth degree and do something like this. If all of the 9s for an outside line are possibly, you have the same substation number, you can work it like that. There's lots of possibilities. You want to narrow this the best you can, though, because remember, this is a real false alarm reduction capability. But in the case of putting a panel out there that dials 9 for an outside line, you do have to deal with these things and somehow compensate for them so your operators don't get up false caller ID errors. These 2 numbers are the actual number the panel is programmed for, which means these are the physical line numbers that are connected to the receiver, unless you're dealing with DNS accounts. If you're dealing with DNS accounts, of course, they're just coming in from the phone company, and they really don't have a phone number per se. They're just trunk lines coming in. Going on down, we have some subscriber options at the bottom of page 1. For example, the On Test field. I should remind you at this point that you can get a help screen anywhere within the SIMS simply by striking the F1. In this case, you can see this is a canceled field. If this account were an active account and it was lost, we didn't want to deal with any of the signals coming in, but we wanted to leave the database there for a while. Let's say a customer was selling his home, selling his business. He wants to cancel his service, but we want to leave the information in there because we want to speak to the next person that purchases that business or that home. So we might just put him on test for a period of time. If he's on test, we're going to get separate indications in our history that this account was placed on test inside account maintenance as opposed to out of service, which is similar but a whole different kind of ballgame. Also, I think you would have noticed when we brought up the help capabilities, you can set up accounts that are placed on test so that they automatically send an email to the email address, depending on whether you want to go to the dealer or the account, so that if somebody starts using the panel again, the dealer can get an email, he can understand what the signal is. Perhaps that's his cue to go out and talk to the customer, and so forth. There's another field for sub-options. One of the challenges within the alarm monitoring business, or the software part of the business, is to provide information to the operators in as routine manner as possible. This is not always easy when you consider that you have contact ID formats that come in, SIA formats, modem 2 formats, 3x1s, 4x1s, Europlexes, radio type signals. All these come in, and many times they are provided to the computer completely different different looking method, different way the protocol handles, and it's our job as software providers to try to bring it to you in a little bit more organized fashion and to your customers in a more organized fashion. So there are times that we're going to have to make adjustments on this sub-option field. For example, we may want to disable the user info. So a B1 might be user 1, but we don't want to show anything at all when we send out the open closing reports. There are circumstances like the ITI user numbers. The code comes in A385, which might mean an opening or a closing for user 3. So we've got to find ways to make this make sense to the operator. So all they see is a user number on the reports with possibly the name if they want it on there. But the codes that come in the case of 4x2 with modifiers, we're going to have to reach in here and use some of these capabilities within the subscriber option from time to time. Most of these are going to be fairly straightforward. I think that they'll be very meaningful when you look at this, but there could be times you're going to need to contact your SIM support personnel for the particular panel that you're using, and they'll probably ask you for an all-event summary report, and then once we see it back at the SIM support center, we can understand how to deal with it and what to best suggest for you for your subscriber option. Also, there is a closed NOTs. Now, NOTs are not tested. If we send in auto tests, we'll get into that pretty soon within page 1. If we set this up for 24-hour auto tests, if we don't get a test signal every 24 hours, we're going to bring up a no test. Unfortunately, there are some panels that only provide the countdown for their auto test when the account's closed. In other words, during the time that it's open all day, the 24-hour auto test doesn't decrement. So in this case, we only answer yes to closed NOT when we want it to monitor this countdown process only when the account's closed. We have alarm and restore rounds. If we were dealing with a McCullough, we might put in 4-1 here, which means 4 rounds for alarm, 1 round for restore. If you don't deal with McCulloughs, this is probably way outside the bounds of the information you're interested in and is unimportant to you. If you are having to deal with McCulloughs, then this will be almost self-explanatory. Okay, VF back, that's a verification back. This is a usable for whatever you want field. As we have told you before, this is a yes-no field. In this case, we're looking for the verification form that has been returned. When we send it out, we can set this to no. When it comes back, we can set this to yes, so we know we have it on file. Premise verify flag. This is a all-inclusive for all signals in this account. The premise number is going to come up first during our dispatch. So no matter what. We also have the ability to set a prem verify flag in the dealer or the group ID account and by zone by zone by zone. Most cases it's going to be done by zone, but there could be a situation where you have a customer that's creating too many false alarms. Whatever they do is a problem, and you may just want to identify them for prem verify on anything. There is the capability to do warning numbers. Now, the warning number field, this is a capability that whenever the dispatch mask comes up, you can bring up automatically a pre-described warning field, which is programmable, and I could put in warning number 0001, and then whatever a mask comes up for the operator's attention, it's going to bring up warning screen 001, which might mean audio capable, it might mean check for listen in, it might mean anything, whatever we want. Verify with from a certain person, or do a certain procedure, double check the order of your contacts and so forth like that. So it can be a very valuable type setup, this warning number. I'm going to remove it for right now because later on we're going to get involved in dispatching, and I don't want it to confuse us when we get to that stage. Okay, the next section has to do with, again, false alarm reductions. We have the number of trips that were allowed within the interval. In this case, the first one is 6 trips within the interval provided by the second field. And in this case, a 1 means a year. So this particular account, if he gets 6 false alarms within 1 year, he's going to be on a no dispatch status from the local police department. I could have said it for 3-1. 3-1 is a much more typical figure. If we have 3 false alarms within the last 365 days, this gentleman or this particular company is going to go into a non-dispatch status. We're going to create for the operator error messages or warning screens that let them know when they're at 2, letting them know the next dispatch is going to place him in a termination type situation from dispatching, etc., etc. Let's move on now. There's an all okay word for each account. I think this is very predominant in residential accounts, because in commercial accounts, each one of the people that have access are going to have their own all okay or pass card word. Permit numbers, that would be from your local police department. The type of account, whether it is apartment complex, commercial, hotel, motel, so on and so forth like that. Control type, we can have several different control types. Pick our control type. And we're going to see during dispatching, this has got some very positive effects. The backup account. Okay, let's just look at this from the perspective. This is a digital account that we're dealing with, Tequila Willie's. He also has a radio panel located in there that might have a whole different account number. It might be receiver 3, group 1, account 001, just for talking's sake. So I might have to put something different in here. We're going to do this or identify this backup account because later on, during a dispatching, we're going to notify the operator they should be getting a second signal in from the radio. There are circumstances, let's say that if you got a PIR, an interior trap, on a commercial account, you might not want to dispatch on the first one. But if you also had a radio in there and it didn't send you a signal, you're probably under attack right at that time. So we can use these kinds of capabilities to make something meaningful out at a later time. There are alternate backup account numbers. We even have some that have 3 different signals coming in for each account. In the case of high security areas, there might be one overall panel, a radio panel, and a digital panel. There is the notify account. While we've got a contact list within this account we're looking at right now, there may be times that I want to get the contacts from one account in the case of a chain store. In that case, I might have one person's name under the base account of Tequila Willie's, but for all the other contacts, I might go to one account that's got the district manager, the local manager, etc., etc. That's the purpose of the notify account. Also, that's helpful if you have a digital and radio. There's no need to have 2 notification lists. You really only want one, so you would probably point your radio account back to your digital for all your notifications or the contact list. The zone account is a very important field. I believe in a contact ID account there are literally hundreds and hundreds of possible signals that come in. And these can have different meanings for different zones. We don't want you to have to program all these zones in each one of the accounts. So we're going to have an account designated as a zone account where we keep a generic listing of all the possibilities that particular panel can send out. If this were a contact ID panel, I might point myself back to the contact ID zone account so that if I happen to miss something, if I happen to make a mistake, if I happen to do something wrong in the zone data entry, I'm always going to be picked up in the zone account. It may say burglary, unknown location, but at least it says burglary. It may say supervisory trouble. That's okay. That's better than saying invalid, which means it's undefined. There are lots of real positive things that come out of a zone account. Zone accounts can be chained. In other words, I'm showing Tequila Willie's pointing to zone account 98010004. Well, if I went to that account, I could chain it to another zone account, and another zone account, another zone account. Let's just say that I have a dealer that he puts in panels, but he doesn't know what kind of format he sets them for. He leaves there and he throws it in our lap at the central station to try to figure out what he's got. I might chain my contact ID to my SIA, to my 4x2, to my modem 2 format zone accounts, so that no matter which one he picks, I'm going to get a generic answer for the signal coming in. I don't recommend this. I don't say that this is the answer. But I say this is the reality, and we've got to keep our eyes open for the ability to cover multiple situations no matter what happens. For those of you in Canada that are familiar with open access, this is part of their open access field, which is simply an automatic fire dispatching capability. We can also move into the auto test. Now, as you can see, we have an auto test number and an auto test interval. This is a minutes, hours, days interval, and the numbers can go from 000 to 999. For those of you that set auto test for once a month, it makes good sense to set that up for 728 hours or 729 hours as opposed to 30 days. The resolution for the auto test is much tighter. It works every hour then instead of just at midnight bringing up all the ones that should have come up any time during that day. So not only is your resolution better, but it spreads the auto tests or the NOTs, the no tests, up throughout the day as opposed to just bombing you at midnight when you're probably on minimum manning anyway. If you're doing minutes, again, they can be set as low as you want. It will check every minute and decrement a counter, which when that counter reaches -1, then it knows that it should have already gotten a signal in. So let's talk about resolution here just for a second on auto test, because a lot of people have an unclear understanding of this. If my auto test is set for every 24 hours, that simply means that every hour on the hour I decrement a counter located within this account. So if I were to save this right now and I set the auto test counter to 024, come 1700 hours, I would decrement it to 23. Come the next hour, 22, and so forth. So even if my test message comes in right now, I'm going to decrement it. That would be 37 minutes from now, 36 minutes from now. So the resolution is going to be within 59 minutes of when we expected that to come in. Average, of course, is going to be 30 minutes, but the biggest resolution is going to be 59. The lowest is going to be 1 minute. So that's why I say if you're going to do things once a month, then how many ever hours in a month? I think it's 728 hours. If you choose 728, mark it H for hours, you're going to have the best resolution that you could actually get. The truth of the matter is you can't use minutes for once a day because that's more than 999. Now, let's move to open closing report. Now, along with the open closing report, to the right of that is the interval. D for daily, W for weekly, B for bi-monthly, and M for monthly. If you're going to pull open closing reports on account, make sure you put a Y in here. The purpose for that is not all accounts that pull reports are going to pull open closing reports. So if I wanted to pull every open closing report this week, that needs to be done, I can do it with one pass and one report simply by answering yes to open closing report and then a W for my interval for weekly. We'll get involved in the sorting capability of that a little bit later on, but that's a very, very important factor. And it will skip all those accounts that don't have a yes in opening and closing. Now, going beyond that, we have language, fairly unimportant. I mean, another sorting type field. The next one can be very important. There is a history routing and a database routing field. That's the next two fields. Again, if you're in question, you can bring up your help screen to start helping you get identification here. Now, these are our recommended routing selections. This does not mean this is what you have to choose, but it's simply the routings that we wanted to use as an example. In the particular routing field we're looking at now, there's a 9 in it. And if I come over here, I know that 9 equals an H-S-O report for emailing. These routing fields are especially important if you're going to group your report solution with the form writer product provided by SIMS. In this case, I can sift through accounts and pick up all those accounts that have email capability that want an open and closing report, and in this case want a detailed open and closing report. So there are lots of different ways that I want to group these together. Now, on the next field is database routing. It's a similar kind of thing, except it has to do with whether you want to send their accounts out by email. There could be printful file, their client verification forms. It's just another capability like that. The next field is daylight savings time. Again, there's lots of different places in the world that have different daylight savings time capability. For us in North America, it's fairly simple. It's just a yes or no, but Australia and Europe and New Zealand all have different months where they start and stop and so forth like that. If you turn on the daylight savings flag within the SIMS2 central station, just make sure that you have it on properly in each one of the accounts. Moving along from there, we also have a field designed for time zones. Now, the time zone field is a very interesting field. If I am on Central Standard Time, I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I'm monitoring for those accounts that are in California, they are 2 hours earlier than me, so they're minus 2 hours. If I were monitoring for accounts in Eastern Standard Time, they would be +1. If they were in Nova Scotia, they might be +1. And then we have an additive 30-minute flag. So if it's +1 and I answer yes to the 30 minutes, it's actually going to be plus an hour and a half. Now this is very important because when we generate reports for these customers, we want to deliver these reports to them in their own local time. And these are the adjustments that are going to be done on the reports. Also, when in the middle of dispatching, we're going to put up the current time at the account. And we also use these fields to make sure that the local time that we provide to the central station operators helps them in understanding what time it is there. Okay, and there are other factors that we get involved in a contact list to identify all kinds of very special things. The next group of 14 fields are the special codes. Again, these were introduced in the very initial stages of the SIMS2. A lot of them have been augmented by some of the others, database routing fields and things like that. But these are codes that you can use to identify anything you want to about this account. The exact type of panel, whether it's was installed in a year or 10 years ago, or whether it requires service every January. There are lots of possibilities in this on these special codes, and you can use them for anything you want and to mean anything you want. That concludes the page 1 of Account Maintenance Vitals.